Picture this. You've done the shadow work, faced your demons, and integrated your darkness. You should feel whole, radiant, unstoppable. Instead, you find yourself in what Jung called the void, a hollow emptiness where nothing seems to matter anymore. Your old motivations feel fake. Your achievements taste like ash. You're not depressed, but you're not alive either. In the next 50 minutes, you'll discover why the void isn't the end of your healing journey. It's the sacred initiation into wholeness. So what's actually going on here? You wake up, and the morning coffee doesn't spark joy. You check your phone, and the dopamine hit feels manufactured. You look at your career goals and wonder why you ever cared. Friends ask how you're doing, and you say, fine, because how do you explain that you feel like a ghost in your own life? Your therapist says you're making progress, but progress toward what you've lost the script that once told you who to be, what to want, how to measure success. This is the paradox Jung spent decades studying. Why do people feel most empty precisely when they should feel most whole? You've done everything right: therapy, meditation, shadow integration. You've faced your trauma, set boundaries, learned to say no. Yet here you are, staring at your life like it belongs to someone else. Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing director, described it perfectly. I spent 2 years in therapy dealing with my people-pleasing. I thought I'd emerge confident and purposeful. Instead, I feel like I'm watching my life through glass. I know I'm healthier, but I don't know who I am anymore. My husband asks what I want for dinner, and I genuinely don't know. Not because I'm indecisive, but because the person who had preferences was a performance. Who am I without the show? Marcus, a successful lawyer, put it differently. After confronting my daddy issues and workaholism, I expected to feel free. What I got was this strange numbness. Not depression, just nothing, like I'm waiting for something to begin. I sit in my corner office and feel like an actor who forgot his lines. The script that drove me for 20 years, prove you're worthy, outwork everyone, never show weakness, suddenly feels foreign. This isn't failure. This isn't regression. This is what Jung called the dissolution of the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. Your persona protected you through childhood trauma, social expectations, and survival needs. But when you begin individuation, the process of becoming your authentic self, the old identity must die before the new one can be born. The persona in Jung's framework is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is. It's the good student, the reliable employee, the strong friend, the perfect parent. These roles served you well, but they were constructed to meet external demands, not express internal truth. Individuation, Jung's term for psychological maturation, requires dismantling these false selves to discover what lies beneath. But here's what nobody tells you. Between the death of the false self and the birth of the authentic self lies the void. A liminal space of not knowing that feels like emotional death, but is actually psychological birth. This isn't pathology, it's initiation. Jung understood that consciousness emerges through destruction. The caterpillar doesn't gradually become a butterfly. It dissolves completely in the cocoon, its tissues breaking down into primordial soup before reorganizing into something entirely new. You're not broken, you're in the cocoon. What's the core mechanism? Enter the framework. Pillar 1, the persona, death. Your old identity is dissolving because it was never really you. The high-achieving perfectionist, the selfless caregiver, the strong silent type. These were survival strategies, not authentic expressions. Jung wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is. The void begins when this constructed self can no longer sustain itself. Elena spent her 20s as the responsible one, managing everyone's emotions, solving everyone's problems, never asking for help. Her identity was built around being needed. After therapy, she set boundaries and prioritized herself. But instead of feeling empowered, she felt lost. If I'm not the helper, who am I? The question haunted her for months. I used to know exactly how to spend my weekends helping my sister with her kids, organizing family gatherings, being everyone's emotional support. Now I had entire Saturday afternoons with no agenda and no idea what I actually wanted to do. The persona death feels disorienting because you've spent decades perfecting a role. You became so good at being who others needed that you forgot who you actually were underneath. When that performance finally exhausts itself, you're left with unfamiliar territory, your authentic self still emerging from years of suppression. This process mirrors what shamanic traditions call ego death, the dissolution of constructed identity that precedes spiritual rebirth. But unlike mystical experiences, the void is a slow burn, a gradual recognition that your life has been a beautiful prison of others' expectations and your own survival mechanisms. Avoid trying to rebuild your identity immediately. The dissolution must complete before reconstruction begins. Many people panic in the void and rush toward a new identity, but this usually results in another false self, perhaps more sophisticated, but still inauthentic. Each morning for 1 week, sit quietly and ask, what mask am I putting on today? Notice without judgment. Notice the different masks for different contexts. Professional, you family, you social you. Let the awareness create space between you and your automatic roles. Pay attention to which masks feel heavy and which feel natural. Pillar 2, the achievement hangover. Everything you once chased, success, approval, security, suddenly feels hollow because it was motivated by wounds, not authentic desire. You achieved to prove your worth, accumulated to fill an inner void, performed to earn love. Now that you've healed the core wounds, these pursuits feel meaningless. This is what I call the achievement hangover, the sickening realization that your life's work was a trauma response. James climbed the corporate ladder for 15 years, driven by his fear of being seen as lazy like his father. Each promotion was a rebellion against his dad's unemployment and depression. After shadow work revealed this pattern, promotions stopped exciting him. I realized I was running from shame, not toward joy. Every late night, every weekend, worked. Every competitor outmaneuvered. I was trying to prove to a dead man that I wasn't worthless. When James achieved partner at his firm, the goal he'd worked toward for a decade, he felt nothing. I kept waiting for the satisfaction to kick in. Instead, I felt like I'd won a game I never wanted to play. The victory was hollow because the entire pursuit was motivated by fear. This hangover extends beyond career achievement. Relationship patterns, financial goals, lifestyle choices, all the elaborate structures you built to feel safe, worthy, or lovable suddenly feel foreign. You're like someone who's been drinking to numb pain and finally gotten sober, only to realize the bar you've been frequenting isn't actually fun. It was just familiar. The achievement hangover reveals the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is external, driven by fear, comparison, or conditioning. Inspiration is internal, emerging from authentic desire and natural expression. When your wounds heal, motivation dies, but inspiration hasn't yet emerged, leaving you in the space between false drive and authentic purpose. Avoid judging yourself as lazy or unmotivated. Your drive is recalibrating from fear-based to love-based. This process takes time and cannot be rushed. The void is your psyche's way of ensuring you don't rebuild the same prison with different walls. List your recent goals and achievements. For each one, ask, am I moving towards something I want or away from something I fear? Notice the energetic difference in your body between fear-based and love-based goals. Fear-based goals feel urgent but draining. Love-based goals feel exciting but sustainable. Pillar 3. The false self funeral. The person you thought you were is dying, and grief is natural. You're mourning not just who you pretended to be, but the simple clarity of unconscious living. Before awakening, your role was clear, even if it was limiting. You knew exactly how to please your mother, succeed at work, navigate social situations. Now you must navigate the uncertainty of authentic choice, and authenticity is messier than performance. Dr. Jung observed this pattern in countless patients. There is no birth of consciousness without pain. The pain isn't punishment, it's labor. You're giving birth to your true self, and birth is never painless. The difference is that most people grieve obvious losses: death, divorce, job loss. You're grieving the death of an illusion, which feels strange because part of you knows it needed to die. Rachel, a former people-pleaser, found herself crying inexplicably for weeks after learning to say no. I wasn't sad about setting boundaries. I was grieving the little girl who believed her worth depended on making others happy. She had served me well, kept me safe in a chaotic family, helped me navigate school and early career. But she had to die for the real me to live. The funeral process is complicated because you're simultaneously grateful for the false self's protection and relieved to be free of its limitations. The perfectionist in you prevented failure, but also prevented authentic success. The people-pleaser in you avoided conflict, but also avoided intimacy. The stoic in you survived trauma, but also cut you off from joy. This grief often includes mourning the life you might have lived if you'd been authentic from the beginning. Who would I have become if I hadn't spent 20 years trying to be who my father wanted? These questions are painful but necessary. They clear space for authentic choice moving forward. The false self funeral also includes grieving other people's reactions to your transformation. Friends who benefited from your people-pleasing may withdraw when you set boundaries. Family members who relied on your caretaking may resist your new autonomy. Professional networks built around your overwork may not understand your new priorities. Avoid rushing the grief process or judging yourself for mourning something that needed to end. Honor what the false self protected you from before releasing it. Give yourself permission to feel sad about saying goodbye to familiar patterns, even when those patterns were limiting. Write a letter to your old identity, thanking it for its service and consciously releasing it. Be specific. Thank you, perfectionist, for keeping me safe from criticism, but preventing me from taking creative risks. Burn or bury the letter as a symbolic funeral. Create a ritual that honors the transition. Pillar 4. The meaning vacuum. Viktor Frankl identified that humans can survive almost anything except meaninglessness. In the void, your old sources of meaning, external validation, material success, others' needs, no longer satisfy. This creates what Frankl called an existential vacuum. But Jung saw this differently. The vacuum isn't empty space, it's fertile ground. The meaninglessness you experience isn't the absence of meaning, but the absence of false meaning. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Jung wrote. But first, you must experience who you are not. The meaning vacuum strips away borrowed purposes, inherited values, and culturally imposed definitions of success. What feels like nihilism is actually discernment, your soul rejecting inauthentic substitutes for genuine purpose. David built his identity around being indispensable at work. He arrived early, stayed late, answered emails on weekends. His meaning came from being needed. After therapy helped him recognize his father wound driving this behavior, desperate to prove he wasn't worthless, like his dad believed work felt meaningless. I used to stay late because I was essential. Now I leave at 5 and realize the company runs fine without me. It's terrifying and liberating. The meaning vacuum forces existential questions you've been avoiding. Why are you here? What matters beyond survival and comfort? What would you do if you couldn't fail? These questions feel overwhelming because your old self had easy answers based on external metrics. Your new self must discover answers that come from within. This phase often includes what spiritual traditions call the dark night of the soul, a period where previous sources of comfort and meaning no longer satisfy. Religious people may lose faith, achievers may lose ambition, helpers may lose the desire to rescue others. This isn't pathology, it's purification. Modern society offers countless ways to fill the meaning vacuum artificially. Social media engagement, consumer purchases, endless entertainment. But Jung understood that authentic meaning can only emerge from engaging with your own depth, not from external distractions. Avoid filling the vacuum immediately with new external meanings or falling back into old patterns because they feel familiar. Let the emptiness teach you what authentic purpose feels like. Resist the urge to join causes, start projects, or make major life changes while in the vacuum. Wait for genuine inspiration. Spend 20 minutes in nature without agenda. No music, no planning, no problem solving. Notice what arises in the silence. Ask yourself, if no one would ever know about this choice, what would I do? Let answers emerge naturally, rather than forcing them through analysis. Pillar 5. The stillness teaching. The void forces you to stop doing and start being. This terrifies the ego, which believes its worth comes from productivity and achievement. But Jung understood that wholeness requires integration of both action and stillness, doing and being. The stillness teaching reveals that your value isn't dependent on your output, a revolutionary concept in a culture that equates human worth with economic productivity. Eastern philosophy calls this Wu Wei, effortless action that flows from presence rather than force. You can't access this state while addicted to busyness and external validation. The void is your forced initiation into Wu Wei, teaching you that sustainable action emerges from stillness, not from pushing against resistance. Maria, a serial entrepreneur, found herself unable to start her next venture after shadow work revealed her workaholism as a response to childhood poverty fears. I kept waiting for the fire to return. I had built 3 successful companies by grinding through exhaustion and willpower, but that engine was broken. Instead, I discovered something better: spaciousness. When I finally launched my new business, it came from creativity rather than compulsion. The ideas flowed instead of being forced. The stillness teaching challenges every cultural message about success. You've been trained to believe that value comes from constant improvement, endless growth, perpetual motion. The void says, what if your worth is inherent? What if rest is productive? What if not knowing is wisdom? This teaching is particularly difficult for high achievers who've built identity around accomplishment. Sitting still feels like death because motion has been your definition of life. But Jung observed that the psyche requires cycles of expansion and contraction activity, and rest engagement and withdrawal. The stillness teaching also reveals the difference between productive rest and avoidant rest. Productive rest is conscious you're present with the stillness, using it to restore and reflect. Avoidant rest is unconscious. You're escaping from feelings or responsibilities through numbing activities. Avoid pathologizing your need for rest and reflection or filling still moments with distractions. The cocoon stage requires stillness and fighting. This natural rhythm creates unnecessary suffering. Honor the teaching instead of resisting it. Schedule void time. Daily 15 minutes of sitting without agenda phone or task. Let boredom arise without fixing it. Notice the difference between stillness that feels nourishing and stillness that feels empty. Practice being present with whatever arises without rushing to action. Pillar 6. The counterfeit versus authentic. Here's the counterintuitive truth. The void reveals the difference between what you think you want and what you actually want. Most desires are implanted by conditioning, family expectations, social media, cultural programming. In the void's silence, these false desires lose their power, creating space for authentic impulses to emerge. This is perhaps the void's greatest gift, the capacity to distinguish between counterfeit and authentic desire. Research by Dr. Tim Kasser at Knox College shows that people focused on extrinsic goals, wealth, fame, image, report, lower well-being than those pursuing intrinsic goals, personal growth, relationships, community. The void naturally shifts your focus from extrinsic to intrinsic by revealing which desires actually belong to you. Thomas thought he wanted to be a CEO until the void stripped away his ego's agenda. I realized I wanted power because I felt powerless as a child. My father controlled everything through rage and criticism. I thought becoming the boss would finally make me safe. But when that wound healed, I discovered I actually wanted to teach. Power over others never interested me. I wanted to empower others. He now runs leadership workshops and feels more fulfilled than when chasing corner offices. The irony is that I'm more influential as a teacher than I ever was climbing corporate ladders, but the influence comes from service rather than ego, and that makes all the difference. The counterfeit versus authentic principle applies to every area of life. Counterfeit love is based on need and control. Authentic love is based on choice and freedom. Counterfeit success is measured by external metrics. Authentic success is measured by internal satisfaction. Counterfeit spirituality is about appearing enlightened. Authentic spirituality is about being real. The void forces this distinction because counterfeit desires lose their power when the wounds that created them heal. You may have spent years wanting a specific relationship, career, or lifestyle, only to discover in the void that these wants belonged to your wounded self, not your authentic self. This can be disorienting because you've organized your entire life around counterfeit desires. Goals that once excited you now feel foreign. Relationships that once felt essential now feel draining. Activities that once brought pleasure now feel empty. Avoid dismissing new interests as impractical or judging yourself for changing direction. The void often reveals unconventional but deeply satisfying paths that your conditioned mind would have rejected. Trust that authentic desires, while often unexpected, lead to sustainable fulfillment. Create 2 lists: what I think I should want and what I actually want when no one is watching. Notice the difference in energy between shoulds and wants. Ask yourself, if nobody would know about this choice, what would I do? Pay attention to desires that emerge in solitude versus desires that emerge in social contexts. Pillar 7. The shadow's integration. The void occurs because you've done the hard work of integrating your shadow. The aspects of yourself you previously denied or suppressed. This integration dissolves the internal war between good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable parts of yourself. But wholeness feels strange after a lifetime of internal conflict. When you stop fighting yourself, the energy previously used for internal battle becomes available for creation and presence. Jung observed, "Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries." When you accept your anger, greed, selfishness, and other shadow qualities as part of your humanity, rather than evidence of your badness, you stop spending enormous energy on self-rejection. Lisa spent years suppressing her anger to maintain her nice girl image. Her family praised her for being sweet and agreeable, so she learned to stuff down any feelings that contradicted this identity. Shadow work taught her to honor her anger as boundary-setting energy and truth-telling power. When I stopped being afraid of my rage, I also stopped being afraid of my joy. I realized I had been dimming both emotions to stay safe. The void was the space between her false niceness and authentic feeling. For months, I didn't know how to interact with people. I couldn't be fake nice anymore, but I hadn't learned authentic niceness yet. I felt emotionally naked, like everyone could see that I wasn't actually as sweet as they thought. Shadow integration creates the void because it eliminates the familiar drama of internal conflict. When you're not fighting aspects of yourself, life becomes quieter, but also less familiar. The energy you used to spend on self-hatred and self-improvement becomes available for presence and creativity. This integration process also changes your relationship with others. When you accept your own darkness, you stop projecting it onto others or trying to fix it in others. This can make relationships feel strange initially, without the drama of projection and rescue what's left. Studies by Dr. Jennifer Aker at Stanford show that people who acknowledge their full range of emotions, including negative ones, report higher life satisfaction than those who pursue only positive emotions. The void teaches you that emotional wholeness includes darkness and light. Avoid missing the gift of integration because it feels unfamiliar. Your new wholeness includes previously rejected aspects, and this expansion can feel overwhelming initially. Give yourself time to adjust to being complete rather than fragmented. Notice when you judge others harshly. Ask, what part of myself am I seeing in them? Practice accepting that disowned quality in yourself. Example: if someone's selfishness triggers you, explore your own suppressed selfishness. How might healthy selfishness serve you? Pillar 8. The liminal space. Anthropologists study liminal spaces, the threshold between one identity and another. Indigenous cultures honored these transitions with vision quests and initiation rites that could last months or years. Modern society offers no such container, so we pathologize the natural process of identity transformation. The void is your vision quest, an initiation into authenticity that industrial culture doesn't recognize or support. You're neither who you were nor who you're becoming. This in-between space feels uncomfortable because the ego prefers clear categories and solid ground. But transformation requires liminality. You must die to your old self before being born into your new self. Dr. Richard Rohr writes about this phenomenon in Spiritual Development. We are always standing at the edge of the next stage of our lives. The void is that edge, scary but necessary. Unlike linear progress, psychological development includes periods of dissolution that feel like regression, but are actually preparation for expansion. Carlos, a former military officer, described his void experience. After leaving the service and doing trauma therapy, I felt like I was floating in space. No rank, no mission, no clear identity. It took a year to realize I wasn't lost. I was free. The military had given me structure, but also limited my possibilities. The void was teaching me to create my own structure based on internal authority rather than external command. Liminal space challenges your need for certainty and control. You can't force your way through it or think your way out of it. The only way through is surrender, accepting that transformation includes periods of not knowing who you are or where you're going. Modern psychology often misunderstands liminality as pathology because it looks like instability. But anthropologist Arnold van Gennep identified liminality as essential to human development. Without it, we remain stuck in outdated identities that no longer serve our growth. The liminal space also includes relationship changes. As you transform, some relationships that were based on your old identity will naturally dissolve or evolve. This can feel like loss, but it's actually alignment. You're attracting people who resonate with your authentic self rather than your performed self. Avoid rushing to establish a new identity or falling back into old patterns because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Liminality is meant to be temporary but cannot be bypassed. Let the in-between space teach you flexibility and trust. Practice saying, "I don't know," when asked about your plans, preferences, or identity. Notice the liberation in uncertainty versus the prison of false certainty. Experiment with phrases like, "I'm exploring," "I'm in transition," or "I'm discovering," instead of forcing premature clarity. Isn't this just depression with a fancy name? This is the most common misconception about the void. Depression typically involves hopelessness, fatigue, negative self-talk, and loss of pleasure in activities you once enjoyed. The void feels more like neutral emptiness, not heavy, but spacious. Depression closes possibilities. The void opens them. In depression, you can't imagine feeling better. In the void, you sense something new emerging, but can't yet name it. Depression often includes harsh self-criticism. "I'm broken, lazy, worthless." The void includes gentle confusion. "I don't know who I am anymore, but that's okay." If you're experiencing persistent hopelessness, sleep disruption, or thoughts of self-harm, please consult a mental health professional. The void, while challenging, maintains an underlying sense of possibility. How long does this phase last? Jung never provided timelines because individuation is unique to each person. Some experience weeks, others months, or even years. The duration depends on how thoroughly you've shed your false identity, how patient you are with the rebuilding process, and how much your environment supports transformation versus pushing you back into old patterns. Rushing the process usually extends it when you try to force new meaning or identity. You often create another false self rather than discovering your authentic self. The void has its own timeline that cannot be controlled, only honored. What if I never find meaning again? This fear actually proves you're in the void rather than clinical depression. The capacity to worry about meaning indicates that meaning matters to you deeply. People in true existential despair don't ask this question. They've given up hope that meaning exists. Your concern about meaning suggests your soul is preparing for authentic purpose to emerge. Jung taught that meaning cannot be manufactured through willpower or positive thinking. It emerges organically when you align with your deepest nature. Trust that authentic purpose arises from stillness and presence, not from forcing or searching. Take a moment to reflect. What old identity are you grieving? What new self might be waiting to emerge from the silence? Pillar 9. The transcendent function. Jung's most profound insight was the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to bridge opposites and create new solutions that include both poles of a paradox. The void activates this function by dissolving your habitual either-or thinking patterns. You stop choosing between career or family logic, or intuition strength or vulnerability, and start integrating both sides of apparent contradictions. This represents a quantum leap in consciousness. Instead of swinging between extremes or choosing sides, you learn to hold paradox with grace. The transcendent function doesn't resolve opposites. It transcends them by finding a third way that honors both truths. Amanda, a former perfectionist, experienced this during her void period. I stopped trying to be either perfect or a mess. I discovered I could be conscientious without being obsessive caring, without being codependent, strong without being rigid. The void taught me that both and is more powerful than either or. Before the void, Amanda swung between perfectionist control and rebellious chaos. When perfectionism exhausted me, I'd go the opposite direction. Stop caring about anything. Let everything fall apart. Then the chaos would scare me back to perfectionism. It was exhausting. The transcendent function allowed her to find middle ground caring without controlling, having standards without rigidity. The transcendent function applies to every area of life. You can be independent and interdependent, confident and humble, decisive and open-minded. These aren't contradictions to resolve, but complementary aspects to integrate. This function emerges naturally in the void because the space between identities allows for new configurations. When you're not locked into a rigid self-concept, you can hold multiple truths simultaneously. You can be sad about ending a relationship and excited about new possibilities. You can grieve your old career and anticipate your new direction. Neuroscience supports Jung's insight research by Dr. John Cunios shows that breakthrough solutions often emerge when the brain enters a relaxed, open state rather than focused problem-solving mode. The void creates optimal conditions for the transcendent function to operate. Avoid falling back into black and white thinking when paradox feels uncomfortable. Both and requires more sophistication than either or, but it also provides more creative solutions and sustainable integration. When facing a difficult choice, ask, how might both options be true? Or, what's the third option I'm not seeing? Practice holding opposites without rushing to resolve them. Example, I can love someone and set boundaries with them. Notice how this feels different from, I must choose between love and boundaries. Pillar 10, the fertile emptiness. The final pillar reveals the void's ultimate purpose, creating space for the authentic self to emerge. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you truly are rather than who you were conditioned to be. The void is individuation's workshop, a sacred space where your soul can finally breathe without the constraints of performance expectation or survival. Studies in neuroplasticity by Dr. Marcus Reichel show that periods of rest and boredom are essential for creativity and insight. His research on the default mode network reveals that the brain's most innovative connections occur during apparent inactivity. The void provides optimal conditions for neural reorganization and creative breakthrough. Michelle, an artist, initially feared her post-therapy creative block. I thought inspiration was dead. I had been painting from my wounds for years, angry pieces about my childhood, dark sculptures expressing my depression. When I healed those wounds, I didn't know what to create anymore. But the void wasn't empty. It was pregnant. She spent months without creating anything, feeling like a fraud, calling herself an artist. Then one day I found myself sketching a tree outside my window. Not because it represented my trauma or proved my worth as an artist, but because it was beautiful. My most authentic work emerged from joy rather than pain. The fertile emptiness principle challenges the romantic notion that artists must suffer to create. While pain can fuel creation, sustainable creativity emerges from presence and wonder rather than wounds and drama. The void strips away wound-driven creativity to make space for soul-aligned expression. This fertility extends beyond artistic creation to every area of life. The space created by releasing false goals allows authentic ambitions to emerge. The emptiness left by ending draining relationships creates room for nourishing connections. The silence that follows internal conflict allows your true voice to be heard. Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow states shows that optimal performance emerges from clear attention rather than forced effort. The void teaches you to trust emergence over force, allowing authentic desires and capabilities to surface naturally. The fertile emptiness also includes learning to receive rather than constantly giving or achieving. Many people in the void discover they don't know how to accept support, rest, or pleasure because they've been trained to earn everything through performance. Avoid filling the void with distractions or forcing productivity. The emptiness is not a problem to solve, but a space to inhabit. Trust that the fertility will manifest in its own time and form. Practice not knowing meditation. Sit with questions without seeking answers. Who am I becoming? What wants to emerge through me? What does my soul desire? Let solutions arise naturally from spaciousness rather than analysis. Notice the difference between forced answers and emerged insights. Here's the most brutal insight. The void isn't preparation for wholeness. It is wholeness. You've been waiting for emptiness to pass so real life can begin, but the emptiness is the real life. Jung understood that individuation doesn't end in permanent bliss. It ends in the capacity to hold all experience, including emptiness, with equanimity. The reversal happens when you stop trying to escape the void and start inhabiting it fully. This is Jung's enantiodromia, the principle that everything eventually transforms into its opposite. Your deepest fear becomes your greatest teacher. The emptiness you've been running from becomes the spaciousness you've been seeking. We cannot change anything until we accept it, Jung wrote. The void demands radical acceptance, not passive resignation, but active embrace of what is. When you stop fighting the emptiness, you discover it's not empty at all. It's full of potential, pregnant with possibilities spacious enough to hold your entire authentic self. Convert uncertainty from enemy to ally. Create a daily practice of not knowing. When asked your plans, practice saying, "I'm exploring," instead of fabricating certainty you don't feel. The unknown isn't chaos, it's infinite possibility. Your ego prefers the illusion of control to the reality of uncertainty, but your soul thrives in the unknown. Each morning, identify one thing you don't know about yourself, your day, or your future. Instead of rushing to figure it out, practice being comfortable with the mystery. Notice how not knowing creates space for unexpected developments. Stop measuring worth through productivity. Schedule void time daily periods of purposeless presence where your value exists independent of output. Achievement addiction is a culturally reinforced drug that prevents you from discovering your inherent worth. Experiment with useless activities, sitting in nature, daydreaming, taking baths, listening to music. Notice the part of you that feels guilty for not being productive. Practice presence without purpose until your being feels valuable without doing. Before making any major decision in the void, wait. The authentic self emerges slowly, and premature action often recreates old patterns with new content. Jung said, Hurrying and delaying are alike ways of resisting the present moment. The sacred pause allows authentic impulses to surface. Institute a 48-hour waiting period before major decisions. Use this time to feel into the choice rather than think about it. Notice the difference between decisions made from anxiety and decisions made from clarity. Your false self deserves a proper funeral. Feel the sadness of letting go even when the release is necessary. Grief is not weakness, it's love with nowhere to go. Honoring grief completes the cycle and creates space for new love to emerge. Create rituals for releasing old identities. Write letters to past selves. Create photo albums of old chapters, have ceremonies for significant transitions. Let yourself cry for who you used to be and who you'll never become. Distinguish between void as absence and void as potential. Spend time in nature, practice meditation, engage with art. Let the emptiness be creative rather than numbing. The difference between fertile and barren emptiness is the quality of attention you bring to it. Practice spacious attention awareness that's open rather than focused. Instead of concentrating on specific objects, let your awareness be like sky vast enough to hold everything without being disturbed by anything. Stop fighting the paradox of feeling empty yet whole. Practice holding opposites simultaneously, sad yet hopeful, lost yet guided, ending yet beginning. The transcendent function emerges when you stop trying to resolve contradictions and start living them. When experiencing contradictory emotions or thoughts, practice saying yes and instead of either or. Example, yes, I'm sad about this ending and I'm excited about new possibilities. Jung's individuation cannot be rushed, controlled, or optimized. Your only job is to show up consciously to whatever phase you're experiencing. The void has its own timeline and wisdom that your ego cannot comprehend or manage. Technique. Each day ask, how can I be present to what's happening now instead of trying to change it? Practice cooperation with your process rather than domination of it. Before Jessica forced herself through goal-setting exercises, trying to manufacture motivation, she read self-help books, attended seminars, hired coaches, anything to escape the emptiness. She felt like a fraud going through empty motions, pretending to care about goals that felt meaningless. After Jessica learned to inhabit uncertainty gracefully, she discovered that not knowing wasn't failure, but sophistication, the wisdom to wait for authentic direction rather than accepting substitutes. When inspiration finally emerged, it came from a source deeper than ego and lasted longer than motivation. Before Marcus judged his void period as spiritual failure, he meditated harder, worked with more therapists, tried plant medicines, desperate to feel something other than emptiness. The more he fought the void, the more it persisted. After Marcus realized the void was the answer, not the problem, he stopped trying to escape and started exploring. In the spaciousness, he discovered that emptiness wasn't the absence of meaning, but the presence of infinite possibility. The void isn't the end of your healing. It's the beginning of your authentic life. When you stop trying to escape emptiness and start learning its language, you discover that wholeness was never about feeling full all the time. Wholeness is about having the capacity to hold all of life's experiences, joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion, connection and solitude with equal grace. Jung's final gift was this understanding. In the depths of winter, I discovered within me an invincible summer. Your summer isn't waiting somewhere beyond the void. It's burning quietly within the emptiness itself. The space that feels like death is actually the womb of your rebirth. The void teaches you that you are not your achievements, your relationships, your roles, or your problems. You are the awareness that experiences all of these things. When everything else falls away, this awareness remains unshakable, unbreakable whole. This doesn't mean you'll never feel empty again. Wholeness includes cycles of fullness and emptiness, expansion and contraction, clarity and confusion. But now you know emptiness isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of space for growth, space for mystery, space for whatever wants to emerge through you. This video provides educational content about psychological concepts and is not a substitute for professional mental health treatment. If you're experiencing persistent depression, suicidal thoughts, or other mental health concerns, please consult a qualified therapist or contact emergency services. If this video helped you reframe your empty period as sacred initiation rather than something to fix, comment "Void Warrior," so I know you're embracing the journey instead of fighting it.